Just touching on topics you and the representative spoke about and your comments about the CNN town hall. We have a media that just follows the latest shiny object time after time and gives us false equivalencies, so that we're now in a situation where our president is being blamed for this debt ceiling crisis that he didn't make. I remember 2011 and how President Obama blinked to the Republicans, and we ended up with that sequester rule. I'm just thinking, why aren't we looking at a return to a fairness doctrine of some kind for broadcast media, which is the only media, and that would have to include social media, which feeds off it, which is basically what everybody in this country who is trying to keep a family fed and clothed and housed is listening to.
Yeah. Number one, a fairness doctrine would not solve the problem that you're identifying, Susan, or at least the fairness doctrine that we used to have. We used to have balance in our media not because of the fairness doctrine, but because most radio and television stations in the country were locally owned. That changed in 1996 when Bill Clinton signed the Telecommunications Act. And now you've got, giant, massive conglomerates that are owned by right-wing billionaires and very conservative corporations that, own the media. Sinclair Broadcasting with over 200 television stations. What used to be Comcast, what used to be Clear Channel, and I'm forgetting, Cumulus was the other network that each have, roughly 1,000 radio stations. Frankly, the way to bring diversity back to our media is to start enforcing the antitrust laws again, is to, reverse that part of the Telecommunications Act so that, local newspapers, local radio stations, local television stations are returned to local control. It used to be that you couldn't own, out-of-state radio stations and television stations. You had to live in state. You couldn't own more than a certain number of them. You couldn't have cross-ownership, a radio station and a television station and a newspaper. And there were a few exceptions to that, but by and large that was the case. And the result of that was, and I worked in this field back, my first real job as a teenager when I was 16 was as a country western DJ at WITL in Lansing, Michigan. And then later I was, I helped produce a talk show that, on that station, the Chuck Drake Show. So it wasn't the fairness doctrine that did it. The fairness doctrine only applied to station management or ownership, actually. So if they did an editorial on the air, there had to be a rebuttal. But it didn't apply to the talent. It didn't apply to the people on the air. So I share your concern, but that's what we need to be focusing on, Susan, is breaking up these giant media conglomerates. Make sense?
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate your clarification.
Okay, thanks a lot, Susan. Good talking to you.
Bye.
In fact, I was involved in finding people to rebut. We actually used to do editorials. I worked also at a TV station, WJIM TV in Lansing, Michigan, and the family that owned WJIM, the owner of the station, it was just a local family. They would come on and do editorials, and Tom Jones and I had to, that was his name, had to find, a local person to rebut the editorial because the fairness doctrine called for that. But that was it, just the editorials from the station ownership. We'll be right back.